What happens when an undercover CEO discovers that his own luxury hotel chain has been failing its guests? Nicholas Carter built a world-class hospitality empire, but behind the polished marble floors and five-star reviews, a toxic culture had taken root. Staff judged customers by their appearance, dismissing those they deemed unworthy of true service. Instead of relying on second-hand reports, Nicholas went undercover to see the truth for himself. And what he uncovered will change his company forever. This is a story of leadership, accountability, and a CEO who refused to let his vision be corrupted. Let's dive in. Nicholas Carter had spent the last 15 years building Carter Luxe Resorts, a world-renowned luxury hotel chain that catered to elite travelers. What had started as a single boutique hotel had grown into 15 five-star locations worldwide, each boasting impeccable service, opulent suites, and an unparalleled guest experience. However, despite the company's continued success, Nicholas had begun noticing a troubling pattern. Online reviews, once glowing with praise, now contained frustrated complaints about unhelpful staff, dismissive service, and a growing sense of elitism within his hotels. Guests who didn't appear wealthy were reportedly treated as an afterthought, ignored in favor of those who flaunted status and riches. It was the opposite of what Nicholas had envisioned when he started the business. Luxury, he believed, should be about exceptional experience, not exclusion. At first, he assumed these were isolated incidents, but as complaints piled up, it became clear that something was wrong. He confronted his regional managers, demanding explanations, but their reassurances felt hollow. They cited high sales figures and positive VIP feedback, claiming that their top clients were satisfied. But Nicholas wasn't convinced. He knew numbers didn't tell the full story. How many guests had left feeling undervalued? How many had walked away without a voice, never to return? He needed to see the reality for himself, not through reports, not through second-hand accounts, but firsthand, and so Nicholas made a decision. He would go undercover. Ditching his usual tailored suits and polished shoes, he opted for a casual appearance, dark jeans, a plain sweater, and a simple travel backpack. He let his stubble grow out, swapped his luxury watch for a basic one, and booked a stay at one of his flagship hotels under a false name. No one would recognize him. Most hotel employees had never seen him in person, as management typically handled corporate interactions. As he approached the grand entrance of Carter Luxe's most prestigious location, Nicholas took a deep breath. This wasn't just a personal visit, it was a test. He wanted to know if the values he had built his empire on were still intact, or if his hotels had become just another playground for the privileged few. It was time to see the truth. Nicholas stepped through the grand entrance of the Carter Luxe Hotel, one of his most prestigious locations. The lobby was nothing short of spectacular. A towering crystal chandelier bathed the room in a golden glow, reflecting off polished marble floors. Luxurious seating areas were adorned with fresh floral arrangements, and soft instrumental music played in the background. At first glance, it seemed like everything was perfect, the kind of refined elegance his hotels were known for. But Nicholas wasn't here for aesthetics. He was here to observe the people, the service, the culture. He approached the front desk, where a tall, impeccably dressed receptionist named Mark was engaged in conversation with a wealthy-looking couple. Mark's demeanor was polished, his smile effortless, his voice smooth as he effortlessly listed exclusive suite options and amenities. Nicholas watched closely as the couple laughed at his casual charm, clearly enjoying the personalized attention. Then, the moment Nicholas had been waiting for arrived. A shift in how guests were treated. An elderly woman with a cane slowly approached the front desk, waiting for assistance. Mark glanced at her but made no move to acknowledge her presence. Instead, he kept chatting with the well-dressed couple, pretending not to notice her. The woman hesitated, then cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me," she said politely. Mark's smile faltered. He turned to her, expression noticeably less enthusiastic, and said, "I'll be with you in a moment." But his tone lacked warmth. It was dismissive. The couple he had been assisting had already stepped away, yet Mark continued to ignore the elderly guest, as if waiting for her to give up and leave. Nicholas's stomach tightened. This was what he feared. preferential treatment based on assumptions. Glancing around the lobby, he saw staff clustered together, chatting amongst themselves instead of helping guests. Some employees threw quick, calculating glances at new arrivals, their expressions shifting based on how expensive their clothing or luggage looked. The atmosphere, though beautiful, felt cold, impersonal, rather than welcoming. Nicholas exhaled slowly, his suspicion now confirmed. His hotel looked flawless on the surface, but beneath the luxury, something was broken. The true test, however, was yet to come. He needed to see how they treated a guest who didn't fit their mold. And soon, the perfect opportunity would present itself. Nicholas didn't have to wait long for a moment that would test the hotel's true service standards. A woman in a wheelchair rolled through the grand entrance, her sharp eyes scanning the opulent lobby. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her attire simple yet elegant. She didn't wear flashy jewelry or designer logos, but there was an undeniable poise about her. She approached the front desk, stopping near the reception counter, where Mark was now leisurely organizing paperwork. She waited patiently, her hands resting lightly on the armrests of her wheelchair. A full 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Mark didn't acknowledge her, pretending to be absorbed in his tasks. Nicholas, standing nearby, watched as her polite smile faltered slightly, replaced by a subtle tightness in her expression. Finally, she cleared her throat and spoke up. "Excuse me, I'd like to inquire about your luxury suites." Mark barely glanced at her before giving a dismissive chuckle. "Those suites are quite expensive," he said flatly. Nicholas's jaw clenched. The woman's expression didn't change, but he caught the slight tightening of her grip on the wheelchair's armrest. "I understand," she said evenly, "but I'd still like to see the options." Mark sighed, acting as though she were wasting his time. He hesitated before saying, "We have some more affordable rooms. Maybe something more..." Nicholas felt his blood boil, the sheer audacity. Not only had Mark ignored a paying guest, but he had openly judged her financial status based purely on appearance. The woman took a steady breath, clearly holding back frustration. Before she could respond, another voice cut in. "I'd be happy to assist you," a young woman said, stepping forward. It was Sophia, a concierge in her mid-20s, her name tag neatly pinned to her uniform. Unlike Mark, she offered a warm, genuine smile, bending slightly to be at eye level with the seated guest. "Our luxury suites are some of the finest in the city," Sophia continued. "I'd love to walk you through the options and amenities. Would you like me to show you some of the rooms personally?" The woman's expression softened. "That would be wonderful. Thank you." Sophia ignored Mark's irritated glance as she effortlessly took over the interaction, treating the guest with the same care and attention she would any high-profile visitor. Nicholas watched as the woman ran her fingers over the brochures Sophia handed her, discussing preferences without hesitation. Then from behind the desk, Mark muttered under his breath, "Waste of time." Nicholas didn't move, but internally his decision was made. He had seen enough. This wasn't just an isolated bad interaction. It was a culture issue. And he wasn't just here to observe anymore. This had become personal. Tamping down his anger, he exhaled slowly. First, he would watch a little longer. Then, he would make his move. Nicholas knew that one incident alone wasn't enough to fully assess the depth of the problem. If this kind of discriminatory behavior had been normalized at the front desk, how widespread was it throughout the hotel? He needed to dig deeper. With that in mind, he continued his undercover stay, deliberately testing different areas of service to see if the same patterns repeated. His first stop was room service. He ordered a simple dinner, a steak, a side of roasted vegetables, and a glass of wine. The menu boasted impeccable 5-star in-room dining, but when his food arrived nearly 40 minutes late, the server didn't even offer an apology. Instead, the young man barely made eye contact, placed the tray down without a word, and left. Nicholas lifted the silver cover to find his meal lukewarm and the plating carelessly done. It was a stark contrast to the exceptional experience his hotels promised. If this was happening to him, how many guests had been treated with similar neglect? Next, he wandered into the spa and wellness center, one of the hotel's biggest selling points. As he entered, he observed a striking contrast. Staff members greeted certain guests with warm enthusiasm, offering complimentary champagne and exclusive treatment suggestions. However, when a casually dressed woman approached the desk, inquiring about services, the receptionist barely acknowledged her, handing her a price list with a forced, disinterested smile. The moment she walked away, the receptionist rolled her eyes at a coworker. Nicholas clenched his jaw. It was exactly what he had feared. The staff was trained to cater only to those they deemed worthy of their time. To push his investigation further, Nicholas decided to test the front desk once more, this time posing as an unsure traveler looking for recommendations. He approached Mark again, who had returned to the reception counter. "Hey, I was hoping to get some advice. I'm new to the city and looking for some great places to visit." Mark barely glanced at him, sighing as if the request was beneath him. "Depends on what you're looking for," he muttered, not bothering to fake enthusiasm. Nicholas decided to push further. "I was thinking about upgrading my room too. Any recommendations?" Mark eyed him up and down, taking in his casual clothing before scoffing. "Honestly, if you're just browsing, let's not waste each other's time." Nicholas felt his irritation reach its peak. This was it. Mark and others like him had created a culture where guests were judged the moment they walked through the doors. But not everyone. Nicholas turned his attention to Sophia, who was across the lobby, patiently guiding a guest through restaurant recommendations with genuine warmth. She embodied what Carter Luxe Resorts was meant to be. The real question was, why was someone like her overlooked, while people like Mark thrived? Nicholas took a slow breath. It was time to get some answers. Nicholas had seen enough. The disrespect, the dismissiveness, the elitist attitude. It was everything he had feared and more. It wasn't just about one bad employee. It was a systemic issue rooted in the culture of the hotel. He had come here expecting to confirm a suspicion. Instead, he had uncovered a serious failure in leadership. Now it was time to confront the people responsible. He made his way to the front desk, his expression unreadable, and spoke in a measured tone. "I'd like to speak to the hotel manager." Mark barely concealed his irritation, rolling his eyes as he gestured toward the office. "Paul's busy. What's the issue?" Nicholas's stare was steady. "I'll wait." Minutes later, Paul, the hotel manager, arrived, looking mildly annoyed. A man in his mid-40s, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, Paul exuded the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. His expression was polite but distant, clearly assuming this was another minor guest complaint to brush off. "I understand you requested to speak with me. What seems to be the problem?" Paul asked, his tone practiced and indifferent. Nicholas folded his arms. "I'd like to discuss the way your staff treats guests." Paul's polite mask barely wavered. "Our staff is trained to provide a world-class experience. If you have an issue, I assure you it's an exception, not the rule." Nicholas let out a slow, deliberate sigh, shaking his head. "Is that so?" His eyes flicked toward Mark, who suddenly looked less smug. "Because I've spent the past 24 hours in this hotel, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, it's not an exception." Paul's brows furrowed slightly, his stance shifting. "And you are—" Nicholas didn't blink as he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open, revealing his Carter Luxe Resorts ID. Silence. Paul's face paled. Mark inhaled sharply. The color drained from his face as realization hit. The other employees who had been hovering nearby froze in place, their earlier arrogance evaporating instantly. Nicholas let the weight of the moment sink in before speaking again. "I own this company," he said, his voice calm but undeniably firm. "And I just spent an entire day watching some of you disgrace everything I built." Paul stammered. Carter, I had no idea you were—" Nicholas cut him off. "That's the problem. You should have known. It's your job to know." He turned his gaze to Mark, who now looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "You ignored a paying customer based purely on your own assumptions. You dismissed me the same way. How many others have you treated like that?" Mark opened his mouth but had no defense. Nicholas let the silence hang for a moment longer before turning back to Paul. "This is more than just bad service. This is a leadership failure. And now, it's time for consequences." The tension in the room was suffocating. Every employee within earshot stood frozen, processing the revelation that the regular guest they had ignored, dismissed, or mistreated was, in fact, the owner of the company. Nicholas let the silence linger before delivering his first order. His gaze locked onto Mark, the front desk receptionist, who now looked visibly panicked. "Effective immediately, you are fired," Nicholas stated flatly. Mark's eyes widened and he stammered, "Sir, please, I was just following—" "Following what?" Nicholas cut him off, his tone cold. "A culture of discrimination? Of elitism? Because that's not what this company stands for." Mark swallowed hard, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He knew arguing was useless. Without another word, he turned and began gathering his things, his face pale. Nicholas then turned to Paul, the hotel manager, who looked equally shaken. "And you," Nicholas continued, "you allowed this to happen under your watch. Either you were too blind to see it or too careless to fix it. Either is acceptable." Paul shifted nervously. "Mr. Carter, I can assure you—" "Enough," Nicholas interrupted, his voice sharp. "You're on probation, effective immediately. For the next 3 months, you will report directly to the corporation for retraining and oversight. If I find out this culture exists in any of my other hotels, you're gone." Paul nodded quickly, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by genuine fear. Nicholas took a steadying breath before turning toward Sophia, the one employee who had done her job right. "And you," he said, his tone softening, "are exactly the kind of person this company needs." Sophia blinked in surprise, shifting awkwardly. "I was just doing what's right, sir." Nicholas nodded. "And that's why you're being promoted. Effective immediately, you're the new assistant manager of this hotel." Sophia's mouth fell open. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Completely," Nicholas said. "You upheld the values this company was built on. It's time you were recognized for it." A murmur spread through the staff. Some looked relieved, others uneasy. But one thing was clear. Things were about to change. Nicholas straightened his posture and addressed the remaining employees. "This is a wake-up call. If any of you think treating guests differently based on appearance or wealth is acceptable, you're in the wrong place. I won't tolerate it." He took one last glance around the room, letting his words settle. This is just the beginning. Nicholas didn't waste time. The very next morning, he returned to corporate headquarters and convened an emergency meeting with his executive team. The agenda was clear. Sweeping reforms were about to reshape Carter Luxe Resorts from the ground up. Every regional manager, hotel director, and corporate executive was required to attend. As the video conference began, Nicholas scanned the faces on the screen. Some looked nervous, others indifferent, but he knew that after today, there would be no room for complacency. "Let's get straight to the point," he began, his voice steady yet firm. "What I witnessed at our flagship hotel was unacceptable, and if it's happening there, I have no doubt it's happening elsewhere." A heavy silence filled the room. Nicholas continued, "This company was built on world-class service, not elitism and exclusion. Somewhere along the way, that vision was lost. That changes today." He outlined a 3-phase reform plan, starting with a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. Any employee found treating guests unfairly based on assumptions about wealth or appearance would be immediately terminated. No exceptions. Next, the promotion structure was overhauled. Sales numbers would no longer be the sole determining factor for career advancement. Employees would now be evaluated based on customer service, professionalism, and leadership qualities. This meant that people like Sophia, who genuinely cared about guests, would be the future of Carter Luxe Resorts. Training programs were also completely rewritten. Employees at all levels would undergo mandatory hospitality retraining, focusing on respect, attentiveness, and personalized service for every guest, regardless of their appearance or spending power. Finally, Nicholas announced his personal involvement in the company's oversight. "I will be visiting hotels unannounced, sometimes undercover. I will observe, I will listen, and if I find anything resembling what I saw yesterday, heads will roll." His tone left no room for doubt. A few regional managers shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing their leadership was now under direct scrutiny. Others nodded in agreement, understanding that Nicholas was serious about change. "If anyone has a problem with these new policies, you're free to leave," he concluded. "But if you stay, you will uphold these standards. No excuses." There were no objections. By the time the meeting ended, the message was clear. Carter Luxe Resorts was no longer just a luxury brand. It was a company that stood for respect, excellence, and integrity, and Nicholas was determined to make sure it stayed that way. 6 months later, Nicholas walked into the same hotel where it had all begun. This time, he wasn't undercover. He was here to see if the reforms had truly taken effect. From the moment he entered, he could tell things were different. The lobby staff was attentive, greeting every guest with warmth and professionalism, not just the ones who looked wealthy. The front desk operated efficiently, with employees engaging in genuine conversations rather than making quick judgments. Even the spa and dining areas reflected a noticeable improvement, with staff actively assisting every guest, ensuring everyone felt valued and welcomed. Nicholas spotted Sophia, now in her role as assistant manager, moving with quiet confidence as she checked in on guests and staff alike. She wasn't just performing a duty, she was leading by example. He could see it in the way employees interacted with customers, their enthusiasm no longer forced, but genuinely invested in providing the best experience possible. Then, to his surprise, he noticed Paul, the hotel manager, standing near the entrance, speaking to an elderly man about his recent stay. Unlike before, Paul listened attentively, his posture no longer stiff with arrogance, but open and engaged. He had learned, adapted, and improved. Nicholas nodded in approval. Some people were worth giving a second chance. As he stood in the hotel lounge, sipping a cup of coffee, Nicholas knew that his company had finally returned to the vision he had built it on. This wasn't just about profit anymore. It was about people. For the first time in years, Nicholas felt proud of his hotels again. Sitting in his office later that evening, Nicholas opened his laptop and found an email waiting for him. It was from the woman in the wheelchair, the guest who had been dismissed by Mark but treated with dignity by Sophia. He read her words carefully. She had heard about the sweeping changes at Carter Luxe Resorts, about how employees were being retrained, how customer experience was now valued over status, and how the company was returning to its roots. "This is how luxury should operate," she wrote. "True hospitality isn't about exclusivity, it's about making every guest feel valued. I look forward to staying at your hotels again." Nicholas leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. That single message meant more than any financial report or corporate meeting ever could. It was validation, proof that the hard decisions he had made had been the right ones. It hadn't been easy. Some employees had resisted change, unwilling to adjust to a culture where service mattered as much as sales. Those who clung to the old ways were gone, replaced by staff who understood that hospitality was about more than just price tag. And Nicholas himself had learned something invaluable. Growth wasn't just about expansion or revenue. It was about protecting the heart of what made a business great. As he looked out at the city skyline, Nicholas made a quiet promise to himself. He wouldn't become detached again. He would keep watching, keep listening, and most importantly, keep ensuring that Carter Luxe Resorts remained a place where every guest was treated like they belonged. For the first time in a long time, he felt completely at peace with his company's future. The story of Nicholas Carter's undercover experience teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the true essence of hospitality. It highlights that a company's culture is shaped from the top down, and if left unchecked, elitism and poor service can fester, eroding the very values a business was built upon. Nicholas's journey proves that success isn't just about financial growth. It's about maintaining integrity and ensuring that every customer, regardless of their background, is treated with respect. Luxury should never be synonymous with exclusion. Rather, it should reflect an unmatched commitment to excellence and service. Another key takeaway is that employees define the customer experience. While toxic individuals like Mark thrived in an unchecked system, true leaders like Sophia were overlooked. Recognizing and rewarding the right people is essential to fostering a healthy, service-driven workplace. Finally, the story reinforces that leaders must stay connected to their business. Nicholas had unknowingly allowed detachment to create blind spots, but by stepping into the customer's shoes, he reclaimed control. His actions remind us that great leaders don't just observe from a distance, they engage, correct, and inspire change.